Following the release of Mission Impossible 2 in 2000, one could accurately state that Mission Impossible had solidified itself as a franchise that was here to stay, with 2 highly successful films and having grossed over $1 billion on them in total. You would suspect that a third installment was going to be greenlit and immediately placed in production by Paramount Pictures. Well, that's not quite how things panned out. A 1-year gap in between films is not uncommon by any stretch, but the 4 years of events that transpired from 2002 to the release of the film in 2006 made things seem a bit more uncertain for the franchise. The year is 2002, and David Fincher had been slated to direct the third Mission Impossible film for an intended release in the summer of 2004. Unfortunately, after being signed on by Cruise, Wagner, and Paramount, Fincher decided to leave the project for another endeavor, his critical acclaimed 2007 film Zodiac. Fincher cited many reasons for stepping away from the franchise, in which he alluded to creative differences being the main culprit for his departure from the project. A quote from Fincher himself reads, "I think the problem with third movies is the people who are financing them are experts on how they should be made and what they should be. At that point, when you own a franchise like that, you want to eliminate any extraneous opinions." Soon after Fincher's departure, director Joe Carnahan was hired on as his replacement. Carnahan dug in deep and worked on developing the film for 15 months, from 2002 until July of 2004. During his involvement with the production, Kenneth Branagh was to portray a character based on Timothy McVeigh, as well as Carrie-Anne Moss and Scarlett Johansson to appear in other roles supporting Cruise. After a creative dispute between Carnahan and Paramount Pictures, Cruise then reached out to a new up-and-comer in Hollywood, J.J. Abrams. Cruise had been cited as saying he offered the director's chair to Abrams after binge-watching the first 2 seasons of Alias, a hit American spy action thriller television series that spanned over 5 seasons on ABC, created by Abrams himself. Abrams eventually signed on to direct the film, but due to contractual obligations with Alias and his other hit series Lost, the production of the film was once again pushed back a year. Throughout dealing with multiple delays, Branagh, Moss, and Johansson had decided to depart from the project altogether. Another name you may recognize is Ricky Gervais, who was originally to be casted as Benjamin Dunn, who you know as Benji, but due to scheduling delays, had to depart as well. Simon Pegg, who himself reports of landing the role during the Carnahan era, states that Gervais was never meant to play the role of Benjamin, and instead was signed on to play another character in the film. Billy Bob Thornton was offered the role of Owen Davion but declined because he didn't want to be typecast as the guy who was trying to kill Tom Cruise. Fair enough, Billy. Amongst other supporting cast members, Michelle Monaghan, Maggie Quigley, Billy Crudup, and Jonathan Myers would sign on to the project. The late Philip Seymour Hoffman, who would go on to put on one of the more memorable villain performances in any Mission Impossible film, accepted the role of Davion, and on June 8th of 2005, the film was officially greenlit by Paramount Pictures. With the cast finally being assembled, Paramount allotted the production a budget of $186 million, $61 million more than the second Mission Impossible film, and $106 million more than the first Mission Impossible film. It was reported that Cruise opted to take a major pay cut to facilitate the ensemble of talent enlisted for the third picture. Principal photography on the film began on July 12, 2005 in Rome, Italy, and concluded in October of the same year. Other notable filming spots took place in Shanghai, Zhejiang, China, Berlin, Germany, and the United States. The special effects work on Mission Impossible 3 is some of the most extensive work on any Mission Impossible production. Extremely reminiscent of a Michael Bay film, explosions, glass, and bullets were the main ingredient for bringing the excitement to the film. One of the more notable scenes from the film is the bridge scene. Taking place in Calabasas, California, the scene was originally intended to be shot on Chesapeake Bay Bridge in Virginia, but due to danger constraints, an alternative location was modeled and staged in California. Having created a simulation of the stunt prior to the shoot, Abrams realized he could find clever ways around not showing the water under and surrounding the bridge. A set was built from scratch and cameras were set to roll. I must say, one of the coolest shots of the film is when Tom Cruise is thrown into the side of a Dodge Stratus while the fighter jet flies overhead. The slide in Shanghai was a heart-pounding scene that enthralled the viewer into the Chinese metro landscape and had the audience on the edge of their seats. A scene from a film that closely resembles this scene is the shot from Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Take a look at the comparison. On a side note, Tom Cruise wasn't even on top of a skyscraper in Shanghai, which is much credited to the talented set designers and the VFX team. Green screen technology was utilized to build the background cityscape for the scene. Wrapping up the film in Shanghai a couple days early certainly made the studio happy. Music for the film was composed by Michael Giacchino, making him the third composer to put his spin on the franchise's direction. Following Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer is certainly no easy task, but Giacchino held his own. The original score album was released on May 9th, 2006. Unlike the other two Mission films, no soundtrack album featuring the film's contemporary music was ever released for Mission Impossible 3. Even with no soundtrack for the film being on the table, rapper Kanye West provided a record titled Impossible, which features his hometown native collaborator Twista, as well as Keisha Cole and BJ the Chicago Kid. Mission Impossible 3 went on to release on May 5th, 2006 into 4,050 theaters nationwide and generated $16.6 million opening day, with an opening weekend haul of over $47 million domestically and total theatrical run of $134 million. But while impressive, the film failed to hit the opening numbers that were attained by the two previous films, coming in almost $10 million lower than either. Mission Impossible 3 remained the lowest domestic earner of all the Mission Impossible films until 2022, when Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning arrived in theaters. The worldwide outlook paints a broader picture, as with a total of $398 million grossed, Mission Impossible 3 remains the lowest grossing Tom Cruise Mission Impossible film ever. Despite being number one in theaters for 2 consecutive weeks, it had seemed that the bar was set a bit too high for Mission Impossible 3. While not a complete failure for Cruise and Paramount Pictures, what would follow would be a 5-year hiatus on Mission Impossible films. Inevitably, the next installment would be the game changer for the franchise. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the third part of the evolution of Mission Impossible, hosted by me, Neff. In part 4, we deep dive into Mission Impossible 4: Ghost Protocol, and this will be an installment you don't want to miss. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share this video with a couple of friends and colleagues. If this is your first time viewing my Mission Impossible docuseries, please feel free to recap with part 1 and part 2, which are available on YouTube now. Be safe and enjoy the evolution of Mission Impossible.